Today, we will finish up the last statement made by Hargis on the stand as he addresses the jury. We will also walk through the testimony of S. King Ford and the charges that will be leveled against Honorable Breck Combs. Would these men be able to convince a jury that Judge Hargis was innocent? All aboard the Kentucky-Tennessee Living Time Machine. Please fasten your seatbelts and keep your arms and legs inside of the vehicle at all times. But to get going, we need your help. We still need to fire up that time machine to transport us. Please help us by clicking on the like, subscribe, and bell notification buttons down below. Not only does this fire up the time machine for our flight back in time, but it convinces the YouTube algorithm that we need a bigger vehicle to reach more people who love history as much as you do. Now, back to our story. Defense witness James Hargis. It seems that the Commonwealth had finished with its line of questioning of Judge Hargis. Before he left the stand, Hargis would make a sensational statement about his innocence of the crime for which he was charged. According to the article found in the Hopkinsville Kentuckian, quote, Hargis desperate makes an impassioned personal appeal to jury. Lexington, Kentucky, April 28th. When Attorney Bronson had concluded his cross-examination of James Hargis at Lexington, the accused made a dramatic statement to the jury, claiming to be innocent of the charges against him. Hargis said to the jury, quote, I want to say to you 12 gentlemen that although I have been on the witness stand for over 2 days, my attorneys have not asked me whether I was innocent or guilty of this charge. I want to say to you that I am innocent. And if I were guilty, I would not ask that woman to call me husband or that child to call me father, unquote. The last part of the statement was made with both hands pointing to the wife and daughter of the accused, both of whom were sitting just back of the defense counsel, unquote. What a statement! Hargis is trying to say that the crime of murder is an act that a married man with children would never do. That by being a good husband and father proved that he was innocent of the crime. This is a straw man argument. A straw man argument is when a person wants to prove that their perspective is superior to an opposing argument. That by saying that he was a good husband and father, that alone would make him innocent of all the charges that were leveled against him. That it would be impossible to be both an outlaw and a great family man at the same time. Hargis is giving the argument that basically if you are a bad person, then you are a bad person to everyone who knows you regardless of relationship. This is not necessarily so. There are many cases of family members of serial killers, such as John Wayne Gacy, for example, not a comparison, that acted completely normal, loving, and functional to his family, while being a serial killer out in the world. The Mount Sterling published an article which picks up after the testimony of Judge James Hargis. We gather from other reports that there were witnesses to take the stand after Hargis to impeach the testimonies of the Commonwealth's witnesses. Quote, Hargis trial. The 4th week began on Monday. James Hargis had a lengthy examination last week denying nearly all testimony of witnesses against him. Strong efforts were made to impeach the witnesses against Hargis. Alex Hargis on Saturday denied knowledge of conspiracy involving his brother. The case will probably consume all of this week, unquote. In the Mount Vernon Signal, we read an interesting version of events. Quote, the testimony of the defense in the Hargis case at Lexington was closed Monday, and the Commonwealth began the introduction of rebuttal testimony. The accused was put on the stand and made an important statement, which the next witness contradicted. Alex Hargis denied any connection whatever with the Cockrill or Markham murders. The contempt rule against Breck Combs was dismissed, unquote. While we will get to the testimony of Alex Hargis a little later in this story, and the controversy that Judge Breck Combs will find himself in, We do find it interesting that the next witness on the stand will contradict Hargis in his testimony. The second defense witness, S. King Ford. According to the Hargis testimony, this is the man who was in the room with Judge Hargis and woke him up from his nap to tell him that Town Marshal James Cockrill had returned to town. But Willie testified to the exact same events. According to the Breathitt County News, quote, the Hargis trial. After Jim Hargis finished his testimony, King Ford was next placed on the stand, who testified that he was in the Hargis store at the time of the shooting, and that Jim did not have any gun, unquote. So, according to the testimony of King Ford, Jim Hargis did not have a gun in his hand when the shooting of Cockrill had taken place. But did he wake him up from a nap, or was Jim Hargis already awake? Why was King Ford in the room in the first place? Did they expect an event to happen? Ford's testimony would not go unchallenged. It seems that King Ford was up for contempt charges in Letcher County at that time. We could not find any record of the trial that had taken place that involved the testimony of Ford. But we can gather from the article that one did exist. According to the Hopkinsville Kentuckian, quote, King Ford, the principal witness for the defense, testified, and then Colonel Allen for the prosecution produced a copy of an indictment against Ford, charging him with obtaining money by false pretenses in Letcher County. A rule for contempt of court was issued against Breck Combs, acting judge of Breathitt County, charged with attempting to intimidate a state witness, and will be heard by Judge Parker, unquote. Since this article also addresses what happened with Honorable Breck Combs, we will take a moment to explain why his case was brought in at the same time as Ford. The case of Honorable Breck Combs. Evidently, charges against Breck Combs was being leveled against him during the defense portion of the Hargis murder trial. It is unclear if Combs appeared before Judge Parker during the Ford testimony or afterward. However, they were close together, and the newspaper made mention of this by linking the two events taking place in the same article. We now have more information about the charges against acting Breathitt County Judge Breck Combs. Combs was acting in the place of Judge James Hargis while he was facing charges of murder and conspiracy to murder. But it seems that Combs could not stay out of trouble himself. He would be brought up to face Judge Parker on charges of attempting to intimidate a Kentucky state witness. We did find out what the charges were about. It simply boiled down to a threat made by Judge Breck Combs while he was acting as judge for Hargis. Warning, this does contain strong language. According to the Daily Public Ledger, quote, James Hargis, county judge of Breathitt, and incidentally a member of the Democratic State Central Committee, when asked if he would resign, said he would, quote, do as he damned pleased, unquote. And the Honorable Breck Combs, who is filling Hargis's seat on the bench while the latter is on trial at Lexington, says that those who testify against his friends, quote, ought to have their damned heads shot off, unquote. Evidently, Breathitt County has produced a damn fine lot of judicial timber, unquote. We have to give credit where it is due. Judge Parker was not about to put up with anyone running interference in his courtroom, especially an acting judge. So Parker forced Combs to face him in his courtroom to answer the charges of trying to intimidate a state witness. As we have stated earlier in the Mount Vernon Signal article, these charges would be dismissed against Combs. But we can just imagine the scolding he received from Parker for making such statements. Returning to the S. King Ford's testimony, we find in the newspapers an interesting statement made by S. King Ford about the personality of Judge James Hargis. He felt that you couldn't scare the judge, and that he was completely innocent of the crimes for which he was charged. According to the article in the Mount Vernon Signal, quote, Colonel S. King Ford of Cynthiana One of the star witnesses in the Hargis trial at Lexington said, quote, Judge Hargis has perfect faith in his acquittal, unquote. Said Mr. Ford, quote, and I myself believe that he will come clear without any trouble. The judge is a man of imperturbable nerve, and you couldn't scare him if you pointed a loaded cannon at him. I believe that he is entirely innocent of the crime imputed to him, and that the jury will so decide. The trial will probably continue most of the week, and there is yet a number of witnesses to be examined and long arguments to be heard from both sides, unquote. It is interesting that Ford would say that he felt that Hargis would be exonerated of the crimes, that he felt that the jury would side with Hargis, that he could not have killed Cockrill. However, other than attacking the witnesses for their shortcomings in life, there has not been any evidence to the contrary that he did not participate in a conspiracy or plot to have Cockrill killed. In next week's video, we will continue with more defense witnesses to the case of the murder of Town Marshal James Cockrill. Would their testimony be enough to sway a jury to acquit Hargis of all the charges laid against him? Thank you. We at Kentucky Tennessee Living would like to thank you for watching our video series on the Appalachian feuds. Don't forget to hit that like button, as the more likes we receive, the more likely YouTube is to suggest our videos to other viewers. Also, to receive notice when we upload a new video, be sure to subscribe and click the bell notification button. Be sure to double check that you are subscribed, as some of our viewers are finding that they are no longer subscribed to our channel. We thank you for continuing to support Kentucky Tennessee Living as we are discovering the mysteries in Appalachian history.